Yeah, it's TexAgs Rewind. Yes, we're brought to you by T-Mobile, and for some reason, Clayton Kershaw, who almost came to Texas A&M, is behind us, and it's because he almost threw a no-hitter, or excuse me, a perfect game, but that did not end up happening. Got the Fan Show guys here with us from Gerard Construction. It is TexAgs Rewind presented by T-Mobile. They want to remind you to visit T-Mobile.com/across-America to learn how you get value and coverage through T-Mobile. Guys, what was the best part of the show today?
I mean,
I'm going to say, I'm going
shirtless.
to inflate their egos, but Bronny and Scotty C.
They were good.
They're bringing it, yeah.
Zane was pretty good, too.
Zane's all right.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, the
Hey,
best
Zane.
part of the show was us. Are you kidding?
This guy,
the return.
The return.
All right,
the
back.
OG.
So we did talk about Clayton's almost perfect game. That's why that's behind us. Richard Zane has some passionate thoughts. These guys have some thoughts on that as well. Steve McGee came on, and we talked about the spring game. Good times as always with him. The baseball bunch got ready for this Georgia series. Starts tonight, a huge series after Georgia. You got DBU. Then you got Arkansas. You got Vandy right around the corner, so it starts right now. And Aaron Torres talked a lot about spring game, about everything going on in college football, including Nick Saban.
Yes, you go.
All right, so if you had any kind of sports news on yesterday, there was one story that dominated, and everyone had a hot sports take. This is the world we live in now, that you have to have like this passionate view.
Was it the NBA play-in?
Yeah, that was huge. Everybody was talking about it. Honestly, I like the NBA. I don't like it like I used to, but I get a little more interested this time of year. I used to watch every game, but I have not watched a second.
Thank goodness we have the play-in game so we can get 30-point blowouts that quote-unquote matter.
That matter. But no, the Clayton Kershaw perfect game yesterday. Like, people were so passionate and so upset with Dave Roberts, and of course it becomes a mob on social media. He should be fired immediately. Get him out of there. You're a big Dodgers fan. You're a huge Clayton Kershaw fan.
Absolutely.
He's like your guy, right? Like, if
he is
number
my
one?
guy. Yeah, there is. So growing up, my idol was Sandy Koufax, and then my favorite player that I've actually gotten to watch is Clayton Kershaw. Helps that he's from Dallas. Helps that he was committed to A&M before signing with the Dodgers. Then it helps that he's the greatest pitcher of his generation. But yeah, he is my guy.
How old is he?
He's 34.
34.
He's been in the league since he was 20 years old.
So you would say he is, I'm just asking not to start an argument, but he is a different generation than the Verlander generation?
No, he is in Verlander's generation. Okay. Those guys are 1A. Those two guys are 1A and 1B, without a doubt. I think those two are the best, and then I think Max Scherzer's in that conversation as well. Yep. But I would put Jacob deGrom in the next generation.
Okay.
But yeah, and Jamie in the back can attest that I have had, in our time working together, a number of Dave Roberts hate moments and being upset with that man, but I think he is a good manager, and I think he made the right decision.
Now, the world doesn't agree with you. The world wanted to see a perfect game. Explain why it was an okay decision.
The world doesn't realize that, or doesn't remember that Clayton Kershaw was shut down last year because of an arm injury. The world doesn't remember that Dave Roberts has a history of taking pitchers out of perfect games and no-hitters to protect their health. He did it with Rich Hill in a perfect game in 2016. Dave Roberts, unfortunately, has the dubious honor of being the only man to remove two pitchers after 7 innings of perfect baseball, in Rich Hill and Clayton Kershaw. And then if you remember back in 2016, he took Ross Stripling out of a game in a no-hit situation in San Francisco, and that one really hurt. But Ross Stripling was coming off Tommy John surgery. Rich Hill was dealing with blister issues. Clayton Kershaw is coming off an arm injury. I would rather have Clayton Kershaw be healthy for the entire summer and into October than to have him chase glory in his first start of the year when he has had a shorter runway into the season because of the lockout and the shortened spring training. And he's even admitted that he didn't do as much working out and throwing this offseason, so he's not as prepared as he usually was. He also is pitching in 36-degree weather, and David, I'm no scientist or sports I'm no athletic trainer that can tell you how much the weather and the cold weather impacts your muscles, but I'm willing to bet that there's a greater risk of injury in weather like that rather than 75 and sunny in Southern California. So I think it was the right decision. Now, emotionally, I wanted him to go for it.
Sure.
But
in the moment, you're like, come on.
I can also take a step back and realize that winning a world championship or having a chance to win a world championship is much more important than throwing a perfect game.
So how was his body language? I didn't see.
So in the dugout, it was weird. I've never seen Clayton Kershaw be happy to be taken out of a start.
He was okay.
Be okay with it. Yeah, and it was very the stereotype of a perfect game and no-hitter is that you stay away from the pitcher, you don't talk to anybody. Between each inning, Dave Roberts was coming over and talking to him. He was talking to Austin Barnes, his catcher. He was very light. Clayton Kershaw is typically a very serious competitor.
All right.
Straightforward, don't talk to me on start day kind of guy. It wasn't like that yesterday. It was strange to see, but also I liked seeing it, and he was very happy with his teammates after 7 perfect innings, and he was one of the guys. It was good to see.
Let's talk a little bit about the spring game and just how much do you read into spring game? I know there's a thought out there that it's just a spring game. They're going through motions. Not that they're not trying, but it doesn't mean anything. Doesn't necessarily translate to the fall per se. What is your take on it?
Yeah, there's some truth to that. Certainly there's guys out, a lot of injuries. There's holes in the offensive line. And, I know offensively we always have excuses, but certainly when you've been playing against the defense for 15 straight practices, they start to know your plays pretty well, and it can be, in their favor. Talk a lot about offensively. It's if one guy makes a mistake, it's difficult to overcome. Just think about like a left guard. If the left guard, if it's jet protection, he's supposed to slide to the left, and instead he man sets, and all of a sudden you got a free rusher. Well, it's basically the end of a play. It's an automatic sack. Where defensively, if you make a mistake, there's a good chance that it can be overcome by the other 10 doing their job. And so, it's hard when you have a bunch of new faces, new bodies, guys out that normally play a lot. There's penalties. There's mistakes, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity as a coach to evaluate. And I know I've always talked and focused on quarterbacks, but it's a great time to see them react, right? When things don't go well, when guys around you make a mistake. One of the famous lines we had in Dallas was, "Don't let their mistake become your mistake," right? And I think we saw that at times between, honestly, both quarterbacks, the veteran guys, make mistakes, right? They try to do too much, and it's a good learning experience.
You mentioned all the different moving parts leading to certain mistakes, but also wind, Steven. It was really windy on Saturday at Kyle Field. So as a former quarterback yourself, how much does that actually impact the game?
There's no doubt. I mean, it has a huge impact, especially that level of wind, right? I mean, it was 30 mile an hour plus at times, and that's difficult. And you could see that even, I wasn't at the game, but, watching it online, you can definitely see it affect the throws. Now, as a coach, the elements never affect what you're doing as a quarterback. Think about Josh Allen last year against New England. I don't know if you guys remember that game, but New England ran the ball. I think they threw it, twice the entire football game. But I don't know if y'all remember watching Josh Allen and the arm talent. In that level of wind, he was able to make the throws. That's that elite level arm. And so at the end of the day, it's a bottom line business. You still got to get the job done despite the elements, raining, wet, snow. It doesn't matter. It's difficult. It makes life horrible trying to find easy completions, right? Because it's always, I saw Haynes really struggle into the wind and saw a lot of overthrows with the wind at your back. And those are things you just got to learn to deal with.
So now, Steven, now that you're no longer playing, are you better equipped to drive the golf ball in the wind or to throw a football in the wind?
Just be honest, neither. My golf game, the wind just exemplifies the bad swing. And so that fade, that pro cut, as we like to call it, is just a really bad slice. It's a banana slice into the wind. And so, I understand. I feel for them. I mean, it's difficult. The wind sucks. It really does. I hated spring practice because it was always windy. And I've always said the wind is it's really good for nothing. And, as a quarterback, it's definitely not fun to deal with.
How big is it that the ace for Georgia is not going to be pitching this weekend, and it's one of their best hitters, Cole Tate, the shortstop, as well?
I thought it was the biggest key of this weekend. I mean, I in our roundup that we come out with every week, their ERA for every other pitcher in SEC play is like 9.3 runs a game. This guy is. His whip was like 0.86. His ERA.
He's a first rounder.
Yeah, he is their guy. He is their tone setter, and for them to lose him is It's like losing an Asa Lacy. Okay, you can't overestimate how that changes a team, and for it to happen in bullpen session 2 Tuesdays ago, a week ago Tuesday, they really haven't had a chance to digest this yet. They've kind of known, because this was going to be a Thursday matchup, that they weren't going to get him back, and Kennesaw is a top 10 RPI team that they played on Tuesday. They won 17-15 on a Tuesday. They have got to be offensive to cover up what they're going to put out on the mound. It is huge, because what we've seen the last 2 weeks in 3-2 game 1 victories for the Aggies is Nathan Detmer pitching like a Friday night SEC ace. And if you can get that again on the road, it completely changes the tone if you don't let them be offensive. Because in game 2, to be determined, Georgia's going to score some runs.
Right.
But what they're going to do in game 1 and game 3 against frontline SEC pitching is going to be the story.
I like Georgia's lineup. Without Cole Tate, we'll see what happens, but I do like the other 8 guys are going to be running out there. And it's, it's one of these deals where if Nathan Detmer or Micah Dallas hands the ball to the bullpen with a lead, that it's not over, because not only has A&M struggled, but Georgia has a couple of comeback wins in their back pocket. The one that most people have seen was the one against Florida, where Florida's closer comes in, who had been dynamite, and I think in 3 pitches. He came in with a 2-run lead, and in 3 pitches, Georgia had won the game. So extra base hits, home runs, they do all that stuff. A&M is going to have to match them offensively, and like Scotty said, getting zeros in innings this weekend is huge. Can you get a 0, or can you limit it to 1? No-run innings and 1-run innings, I think, will go a long way. Look, it's a tough test to go on the road to Athens and win a series. It's doable. A&M can win this series. They absolutely can do it. There's going to have to be some breaks go their way. I thought on the Friday night game or the Thursday night game against Kentucky that Clonch walked off, I thought Kentucky got break after break after break, and A&M still won the game. So that was encouraging. It doesn't always happen like that. In fact, in baseball, it rarely happens that way. That if you hit the line drive off the pitcher, or you have an RBI spot where the second baseman who has a team leading errors, or leads the team in errors, dives up the middle and makes a great play to save a run and throw you out at first. Like that kind of stuff, you're going, okay, it's not our night. And it ended up being A&M's night. Typically, it doesn't go your way when the breaks go against you. They're going to need some breaks to go their way in Athens, I think, to win the weekend, but they can do it. I think they can put themselves in situations to do that.
Richard, in the near future and in the big picture, what does a series win over Georgia do for this team, considering RPI, considering where they are, where the rest of the SEC West is?
It might make me change my negative Nancy outlook that they're not going to make the tournament. That's a huge road win. 2 wins over a top 15 team. It's going to definitely boost the RPI, definitely get them closer to that 15-15 mark in conference that we think they need to hit to make the tournament. So, this is a huge opportunity for them to take 2 out of 3.
I don't know that it's just this weekend. I think we got to look at the next 9 conference games. And what is your record coming out of those 9, heading into a stretch where you're going South Carolina, or Vandy, South Carolina, then the Mississippis, right? And the Mississippis have been scuffling. They may find their footing, but right now they're at the bottom of the SEC West, and both clubs really struggling to find some identity there. But these 9 games on the road at Georgia, at home to Arkansas, and then on the road, it is on the road to Vandy, right?
At Vandy,
Vandy, that's right. So those 9, if you go 5-4 in those 9, that's a huge deal. That is an enormous deal.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That is a huge deal. But also looking at all 9, that seems like that's 3 weeks. That's a little bit too far out in front.
We're talking about making or breaking the season here, right? You can't go 3-6 here and go.
No, I agree.
There's enough time to make this up. At this point, there's not enough time to make it up. You got 4-5 is fine. Anything above 500, what happens if they win the next 3 series? Then you're going, can they host a regional?
Well, right now, Auburn is one of those teams that's kind of moved into that spot. I thought, David Sandop had a really astute observation that
Mark that down.
First time
But
anybody's ever said that.
Alabama and Auburn have exceeded expectations the way Mississippi and Mississippi State so far have under their expectations. But these three series, in the middle of all of this, Arkansas has been the way they are. Even though Vandy has scuffled, a lot of that's based on what they did against Tennessee when Tennessee just rolled over them. So I'm not going to say that Vandy, even though they fell out of the top 25, is a team that doesn't still have first or second best talent in the country. But, Georgia, with their pitching the way it is the key. And then you have also, who are they playing around them? I think it's LSU. Is it LSU and Arkansas this weekend, or is it? It's LSU at Arkansas this weekend. So all of this point in time from the season on, it's who you played the previous week. It's who you have this week. Who are they looking at after that? This is the key. I think you're exactly right. These 9 games are the key.
Yeah, and look, the team doesn't think that way, but we're not on the team. We're analysts looking at this, and the question is, what does this weekend mean? And then you have to extrapolate that out as we start to. I mean, we're 2/3 of the way through the season, and around there. Like, they've played 33 games now, and they played 54, so there's 21 left. So we're over halfway. We're somewhere between halfway and 3/4, and we still don't know what this team's going to be in terms of postseason. So
yes, A&M is the villain, and that's okay. So a couple parts. Why is it okay, and why are they the freaking villain, man?
Well, they're the villain because of the perception that people have. And this went back, David, we've been talking about this since you started about, one of your first weeks on the job. Well, one of the first weeks during the season on your job was when Jimbo got the extension. People were up in arms 2 years ago when I was coming on with Gabe about the original contract. $75 million now is chump change in college football. Mel Tucker makes $25 million per win over the course of his career. Like, guys got, whatever. So, I don't really get the fascination from the outside, but I understand why in a program, if I was an Alabama fan, if I was a Georgia fan, I would understand where, okay, some would say overpaid. You paid a ton of money for your coach. You signed this number 1 recruiting class. I've said it consistently for the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks. From my understanding, and I think I have more information than most, I don't think NIL was the factor that led to it. I don't think it was completely ignored in the conversations either, because every school, every recruit is talking NIL. So, but I can understand, right? Listen, let me even backtrack. To go to the recruiting class, what I would say is, me as an unbiased observer, I can see why the logical reasons why Texas A&M signed this class, that it did stuff that you and I have talked about. You're coming off a season where you finished 5th in the college football playoff poll. You have a national championship winning coach. You took advantage of a crazy coaching carousel where where Oklahoma, LSU, Florida, Miami, all these schools that are recruiting the same players, they all have coaching changes. A&M swoops in and gets the guys. And so I can see from my perspective why logically Texas A&M has this class, but I can also see why if I was a Bama fan, I'd be frustrated too. So I think you become the villain because A&M is doing things that a school that has never made the college football playoff, that has never won a national championship, isn't supposed to do. But I think it's crazy, this conversation that has come as to why Texas A&M is doing those things. Does that make sense? Did I make sense right there? I feel like I went in 30 different directions.
You made total sense. And I guess my whole thing is, but Jimbo's been doing this since Florida State. This is what he does.
Exactly. Now,
the number 1 class, I think there's a lot that goes in. One thing that you didn't mention that I know Houston's in our backyard. And Houston last year was a huge component to the entire country when it comes to recruits. And those guys had ties to A&M, and they got those guys too.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that was what I said on my podcast was, like, it'd be one thing if Washington State signed the number 1 recruiting class of all time, or Wake Forest or something. It's like you said, exactly. First of all, the backbone of the group is Texas kids that are close to home, all the logical reasons that a kid chooses a college, right? And then on top of that, a bunch of these kids committed right after last season during the camp circuit, like they always do. And so, late in the cycle, Listen, again, I don't, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. I don't claim to be a recruiting expert, but if Dan Mullen and Manny Diaz don't get fired, you probably don't get Shamar Stewart, but they both did get fired. And all of a sudden A&M looks pretty good. The defensive tackle, Brownlow Dindy, you don't get him if Lincoln Riley's at Oklahoma, but he left Oklahoma and this kid doesn't want to go to USC where he's ever been. So like, there are totally logical. And by the way, here's the other thing. All these kids were on campus, either for the Bama game, for the Auburn game, which was a CBS national game. A&M wins both. The crowds are crazy in both. Like, there are perfectly logical reasons why this class was put together. But unfortunately, and I'll say this, and it kind of tongue in cheek, like, I'm not trying to make it about myself, but I'm going to make it about myself like I always do. But like, it kind of reminds me of the JJ Redick circumstance a few weeks ago. I tweet something, it gets completely taken out of context, and then the internet makes up its own ideas of what I said and what I meant. And I feel like it's the same with Texas A&M, is if you actually just take context into it, all the reasons that I mentioned, all the reasons that you mentioned, there's a perfectly logical reason as to why A&M put together this class. But everybody we live in a world where people make up their own facts, where people ignore the facts that exist. And then you get to a situation like this, where now we're going into next year and people are talking about A&M as being a villain.
Well, let me bring this up. Why not bring up Texas as the villain? And I know sometimes they are, but they finished 5-7 last year. They lost to Kansas last year. They have a top 5 recruiting class where they bragged about paying offensive linemen money, and they've got the big, what's his name, Quinn Ewers, who obviously is all about the money. So how come that's not a storyline nationally? Like, hello, A&M went 8-4 with a hurt quarterback, and they beat Alabama, and they got a lot of their guys in the backyard. Texas had a top 5 class with a terrible year.
So I remember saying that when the original, not the original conversation, but when Jimbo addressed it right before the second signing day, I said, Texas signing the number 5 class in the country off a 5-7 season is much more egregious. And by the way, with a new coaching staff from the year before, is much more egregious than A&M coming off an 8-4 year when, by the way, the year before they go 9-1, win the Orange Bowl, nearly make the college football playoff. Like, that is much more egregious to me. And so, is Texas a villain? I think they're more of a punchline right now than a villain. Now they start winning, and that's the other thing too, right? They start winning games. It becomes a different conversation. It becomes, they are the villain. They are this, they are that. I just don't think I don't want to say they're not relevant enough, but they're kind of a punching bag. I mean, I know A&M lost to Arkansas last year, but Texas, all the bravado, we're coming to the SEC, their fan base thinks they're coming to win the thing. And then they go to Arkansas and get smacked by the Hogs by like 30. I mean, I don't have a good answer though. I don't have a good answer. And I think you're 1,000% right. And I think it's 1,000% fair question to ask.
Well, Hunter, it's been a minute. What do we tell the people to do?
Well, on your YouTuber, okay, you are going to like it, subscribe, and comment.
Big fan of the NBA.
Sure. No.
Oh, share it too. Thank you.
Huge fan of the NBA.
Yeah.
Huge fan of Texas A&M.
I'm an old Clutch
Yes.
City guy.
Yes.
There you go.
Clutch City for life.
I was there back in the day, yeah.
ClutchCity.net or ClutchCity.com or Clutch fans or just Clutch City.
Just the old Rockets,
The
mid-90s,
old Rockets.
baby.
All right. You know what I'm talking about.
Never
Love that.
underestimate the heart of a champion.
Yeah.
The only
Rudy-
NBA
Rudy
right there.
T.
Yeah. Hey, what was the other thing I was going to tell you guys before we leave? Just don't even worry about
Happy
it.
Easter.
Happy. There you
Happy Easter.